So my current work at the moment is exploring the fleeting nature of time. So something I'm very interested in is how you can use certain materials to mask the progressive nature of time. One material I'm using at the moment is photographic emulsion. So I've been playing around with the light-sensitive properties of photographic emulsion when it's applied onto different materials, and how when it's exposed to light, it goes from white to dark. And I think that's a really interesting device to use to kind of show the progression of time when you're in any kind of space. To begin a project, I've found that I need some kind of theoretical backing to kind of jump off and then look into that and then move into something which I'll create in the studio or out in the field. So if I make reference to my graduation project last year, I based it on Henry David Thoreau's Walden, which is a bunch of essays in this book that was written in the 1850s. And it's about Thoreau when he stayed in a cabin next to a lake for 2 years, 2 months and 2 days. And over that experience, he wrote all these different essays about different months, different things he saw and stuff. And it's really interesting because you can see how he kind of changes as a person from the start of the book to the end. But I stayed in Tasmania's Mount Field National Park last year, and I was only there for 4 days, but I was all by myself and I had no connection to the modern world, no phone reception, no television. It was just me in this little cabin. And one thing about the cabin is that there's this little tap and a sink, and it just provided water for whoever was staying there. Because it was so cold at the time, I had to make sure the tap was running for the whole duration of my stay. So constantly there was this kind of like tapping that was going on in the back of the room that was like tap, tap, tap. And then sometimes it would go quicker, sometimes it would go slower. It was really interesting because there was this constant thing ringing in the back of my head, but it sounded to me a bit like a clock, but it was the only kind of consistent notifier of time while I was there that kept on going, but it wasn't like a clock because it wasn't a consistent tapping, it was all over the place. So that was really interesting. It really piqued my interest in the idea of temporality and the way that time, depending on your mood and depending where you are, changes, or at least the way you perceive it seems to change. Like we've all had a boring flight, and then other times we've had a road trip that's gone really quick, so it's interesting. I think when it comes to my work, failure has turned out to be a sort of friend of mine in that I find that I've been experimenting with different ways to apply liquid emulsion onto the materials I'm using, and I've been playing around with different materials, and I've found that when it doesn't work out to how I've kind of expected it to or what I want it to end up like, then I know not to use that kind of method because it's quite lengthy in that I need to set everything up, apply the emulsion in the dark, let it dry, and then a few hours later come back and have a look at how it worked. So what I've been doing is testing different methods at the same time on different materials. So then I have like a kind of array of results, and then from that I can pick which one works the best. I found that since I've been using photographic emulsion, there's so many variables that I didn't first think would play a big part. And one in particular is the light source that is exposed to whatever material has liquid emulsion on it. So with the emulsion I'm using at the moment, when it's exposed to fluorescent lights, so the lights you would find in a gallery, the image doesn't go black, but it goes to a kind of pink tone. And the more emulsion I put on, the more layers, the darker it'll get. But then at the same time, when I expose it to sunlight, the image goes blue. And the more layers of emulsion, the bluer the image becomes. So it's just an interesting thing how different light sources are really playing a big part. And then moving forward, I wonder how I can use different light sources in the final project to see what effect I'm looking for. So I've actually started using the shed that's up in my garden. My parents have been using it for about 20 years and it's got all their junk in it. But only recently I was like, this would work really well as a darkroom. So I've covered up the windows, and in the process I got my parents to get rid of half the junk that was in there, which they don't need. But then in doing that, I found a whole box of these coloured party lights. I don't know what my parents would have used them for. But
I picked out all the red ones and attached them to old lamps that I found up in the shed. So now I have all these little safe lights scattered around the shed, which is perfect for working in the dark.